Hello everyone, my name is the Storyteller, and today I will share with you some horror stories to help you fall asleep. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. But before that, write down in the comments where you are listening this and what time it is. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss upcoming horror stories. The forest was alive, though it made no sound. Mist clung to the twisted pines like gauze, drifting low over the moss-covered ground, curling around roots and rocks as if it had a will of its own. Eleanor's boots sank slightly into the damp earth. Her chest tightened, not from the drive, but from the oppressive silence that pressed against her from every side. She had inherited the cabin from her gray uncle, a man whose reputation in the town had been almost mythic, whispered in tales of eccentricity, treasure, and dark curiosities. Some spoke of objects he had brought from distant lands, charms, statues, masks, items said to carry a curse, a secret, or worse. She had never believed in such stories, yet the forest made her doubt everything. The cabin came into view, dark and brooding. Ivy clung to the wooden walls like veins, crawling over faded paint and broken shutters. Windows stared at her like hollow eyes, reflecting the fog in distorted shapes. The door was slightly ajar, swaying gently with the breeze, or perhaps something else entirely. Eleanor's hand hovered over the handle, a chill creeping up her spine. Inside, the cabin smelled of damp wood and old paper, with a faint metallic tang that made her stomach churn. Dust motes danced in the beam of her flashlight as she swept it across the furniture, all draped in white sheets. Shadows pooled in corners, stretched along the floor, and for a moment she thought she saw movement. Her gaze landed on a portrait on the far wall, a painting of her gray uncle, eyes sharp and unblinking, almost alive. Something in the gaze made her uneasy, as though the man in the painting were aware of her presence. A sudden thump echoed from the upper floor. Eleanor froze, heartbeat spiking. "Hello," she called softly, though she knew she was alone. The response came not in words, but in a scratching sound, soft, deliberate, like fingernails dragging along wood. It moved. Eleanor's pulse raced. She told herself it was an animal, a raccoon perhaps, but instinct screamed otherwise. Gathering courage, she climbed the stairs. Each step groaned under her weight. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched before her, doors on either side. One door stood slightly open, a dark shape lurking beyond. She approached, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. The room was empty except for a journal lying open on the floor. Eleanor picked it up, hands trembling. The writing was jagged, hurried, almost frantic. Pages were filled with warnings, mentions of the hollow, and the voices beneath the soil. The last entry made her blood run cold. "They are waiting, always waiting, and they know you are here." A gust of wind slammed the door shut behind her. The flashlight flickered. In the sudden darkness, she heard it, a whisper, soft and sibilant. "Eleanor." Her stomach twisted. Something unseen pressed close, and in that moment she realized the forest outside the cabin was not merely waiting, it was aware. The morning sun was weak behind a veil of fog, pale and almost lifeless, casting the forest in shades of gray. Eleanor had barely slept. The whispering voices from the night lingered at the edges of her mind, soft and insistent, like a memory she couldn't place. Every shadow in the cabin seemed to move slightly when she looked away. Outside, the forest was alive in ways she hadn't noticed before. Branches twisted unnaturally, reaching toward her as if to warn or threat. The ground shifted subtly beneath her boots, roots rising and curling like the fingers of some subterranean monster. She found a narrow path, almost hidden beneath the moss and fallen leaves. It led her downward, deeper into a valley shrouded in fog. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. The journal's warnings rang in her mind. Never awaken them, never disturb the hollow. The valley opened to reveal the first true sign of the hollow. The earth itself seemed disturbed, scarred by footprints too wide and deep for any ordinary creature. The whispering grew louder, forming a rhythmic chant that resonated with the pulse in her temples. Alina froze as a hand shot up from the mud, pale, clawed, and glistening. It was followed by another, dragging a half-buried figure free. Eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream, it stared directly at her. Her instinct screamed to flee, but the mist thickened, swallowing the path she had come from. The whispers became a chorus, repeating her name over and over. Every turn seemed to lead her deeper, each step an act of defiance against some ancient, patient predator. Hours or perhaps days passed, the fog turning the valley into a labyrinth of shadows. At last, she reached a clearing where a figure knelt before a stone altar. Cloaked in black, the hood obscuring its face, it radiated something other than human presence. "You shouldn't have come," the figure said, voice low, hollow, vibrating with a resonance that seemed to echo from the ground itself. Alina froze, every nerve screaming. The journal had warned of the keeper, the one who tended the hollow, the guide and warden of the lost. "You have awakened them," it continued, "and now they will follow you until the debt is paid." The ground trembled, subtle at first, then violently. From the edges of the clearing, shadows began to rise, twisting into humanoid shapes. Alina backed away, journal clutched to her chest as the figure rose. Its face emerged from the hood, carved like wood, too old, too alive, its eyes holding centuries of watchfulness. "Survival is your choice," it said, "but freedom has a price." The mist surged. Alina ran. Roots tore at her boots, branches clawed at her arms, but she could hear the whispers, guiding her steps even as the forest itself seemed to conspire against her. She stumbled, collapsed into a depression in the earth, and realized she was already inside the hollow, far from the cabin, far from safety. The labyrinth was worse than she imagined. The stone walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as though alive. Shadows moved independently of the weak light her flashlight cast. The whispers had merged into a chorus of voices, pleading, mocking, screaming. Alina encountered her first creature here. Tall as a man but twisted, limbs bending at unnatural angles, head split down the middle with two staring faces. It advanced slowly, deliberately, as though savoring her fear. She scrambled backward, tripping into a pit concealed by shadows. Darkness swallowed her. She landed on damp earth, scraping her hands on the jagged stone. Above, the creature's silhouette shifted against the dim light. Its twin faces seemed to grin, mouths opening and closing silently. Panic surged, but Alina forced herself to think. She recalled the journal's advice: the hollow feeds on fear. Do not give it life. Using her flashlight, she struck the creature in the chest. Its body shimmered like smoke, then dissipated. Alina knew this was only the beginning. The hollow would not relent. The pit led to a cavern below the labyrinth. The walls were etched with scratches, handprints, and faintly pressed faces, some screaming, some dead. Alina realized these were souls trapped, echoes of those who had entered before her. From the darkness, a transparent figure emerged. It pointed to a passage deeper underground. Fear clawed at her, but instinct drove her forward. The tunnels grew narrower, twisting, shifting, a maze designed to disorient, torment, and break those who entered. Shadows flitted at the edges of her vision. She could hear footsteps behind her, but no one was there. A low, steady chant emerged from somewhere below, the voices of the fallen, warning her, pleading with her, or perhaps mocking. Alina clutched the journal and pressed forward, understanding that survival depended not on fleeing, but on outsmarting the hollow itself. Every shadow, every whisper, every sound was a test. Each misstep could be her last. Alina stumbled through the twisting corridors, her breaths ragged, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Every step seemed heavier than the last, as if the hollow itself weighed down her body. The shadows clung to her, moving independently, whispering her name in voices both familiar and alien. Then the keeper appeared, standing tall and silent at the end of a narrow hall. Its presence radiated a cold inevitability. "You may leave," it said softly, voice echoing in the stone, "but not without cost. A soul must remain, yours or another's. Elena froze. I won't, I can't. You have no choice, the keeper interrupted. The hollow demands balance. Hesitation is surrender. From the walls, shadows coalesced into shapes she recognized. Figures of the lost, pleading, screaming, twisting in forms too grotesque to be human. Elena realized the truth. The hollow didn't merely trap, it consumed. Each lost soul was absorbed, a thread in its living fabric. Desperation flared. She had to find a way to survive without sacrificing herself or another. She gritted her teeth, determined. The labyrinth was alive, yes, but perhaps it had weaknesses and she intended to find them. The next corridor was lined with mirrors, stretching infinitely in both directions. Each reflection was not her present self, but versions twisted by fear. Eyes hollow, mouths screaming silently, hands reaching out to claw at her sanity. One reflection moved independently, tilting its head as if studying her. Elena felt a pulse of fear but remembered the journal. The hollow feeds on fear. Weaponize it against itself. She smashed a mirror with a rock. The shards didn't fall. They floated around her, orbiting like knives. Shadows seeped from the fragments, attempting to drag her into the glass. Elena closed her eyes, controlled her breathing, and forced herself to walk forward. The whispers coalesced into one voice. Join us forever. She pressed on, heart hammering, gripping the journal like a lifeline. The hollow was testing her will, and she understood that only unwavering focus could keep her alive. The iron-bound door at the end of the corridor groaned as she pushed it open. Beyond lay a vast chamber, walls writhing with veins of shadow that pulsed with a sickly green glow. The floor seemed to breathe, inhaling and exhaling under her boots. In the center, a pool of black liquid shimmered, reflecting a darkness deeper than night. The whispers were louder here, not around her, but inside her mind. They spoke of past trespassers, of lives drained into the hollow, of the keeper's patience and the forest's hunger. From the pool, tendrils of shadow lashed outward, probing for weakness. Elena's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. The journal's warnings echoed in her memory. The hollow fears life. It will test your resolve. Do not falter. A skeletal hand emerged from the water, claws glinting in the dim light. Elena dodged, striking it with a shard of stone. The shadow screeched and dissolved. The pool pulsed angrily, as if sensing her defiance. The keeper stepped forward, a towering figure of shadow and intent. The hollow tests all who enter, it said. Your mind will be the battlefield. Only endurance will carry you forward. The chamber shifted. Walls closed in and expanded simultaneously. Corridors twisted into impossible angles. Figures lunged from the shadows, limbs too long, heads twisted backward, faces split and grinning. Elena dodged, stumbled, and forced herself to keep moving, focusing on the journal's advice. Courage is the weapon, fear the trap. One creature lunged and grabbed her ankle. Elena kicked, rolled, and struck it with a heavy branch. The creature dissolved into smoke. Each victory gave her a fraction of hope, but she knew the hollow would escalate, testing every ounce of her mental fortitude. At last, she entered a chamber that made her stomach lurch. Every wall was covered with eyes, hundreds, thousands, blinking and following her. Some human, some alien, some grotesque beyond comprehension. The eyes weren't passive. They studied her, judged her, measured her fear. Voices surged around her, a cacophony of the lost, warning, pleading, mocking. Elena's hands shook as she gripped the journal, drawing strength from the words within. She realized the eyes were not just observing, they were testing her will. The keeper appeared, silent until she focused her attention on it. Few survive this chamber, it said, but you are learning. Elena stepped forward, ignoring the eyes, the whispers, the shapes clawing at her edges. Each step was a victory, each breath an assertion of life over the hollow's will. She had survived the first true trial of mind and spirit, and she knew the labyrinth's center awaited. The hollow's grip tightened. Corridors twisted unnaturally, walls closing and opening as if breathing. The whispers surged, overlapping, merging into screams, a cacophony that threatened to shatter Alina's mind. Shadows lunged from every corner, limbs too long, mouth stretching impossibly wide, eyes staring through her very soul. Alina ran, forcing herself to ignore the fear clawing at her thoughts. Every step was a battle of will. She came to a room lined with mirrors, each reflecting twisted versions of herself. In one, she lay on the floor, drained, eyes open in silent terror. Another showed her holding a weapon she didn't recognize, attacking herself. The hollow's power was in perception, feeding on doubt. Alina smashed the mirrors with a stone, shards hovering midair before dissolving. The keeper's voice echoed, "Endurance alone is not enough. Confront the heart, face it, or perish." Alina reached a massive central chamber, bones and remnants of past trespassers littering the floor. The keeper awaited, figure shifting like liquid shadow, eyes glinting from beneath a hood. "You have done well to come this far," it said. "But beyond this point lies the heart. Many enter, few survive." She stepped forward into the central tunnel, pulsing with a living darkness. Whispers became a roar demanding submission. Alina felt the pull, but she focused on the journal's lessons. Trust herself, resist fear, move forward. Each step was a test. Branches of shadows lashed at her, walls shifted, and the floor threatened to swallow her. She realized the hollow was alive, aware, adapting to every fear she expressed. Her survival depended on mental focus as much as physical action. The tunnel seemed endless. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls, whispering not just her name, but secrets she hadn't told anyone. Alina's mind began to crack under the pressure, seeing events that never happened, mistakes she never made. A hand shot from the wall, grabbing her shoulder. She spun, striking it with a rock. It dissolved into black smoke. The whispers escalated, voices overlapping, forming a painful chorus of torment. She stumbled, nearly losing herself in the darkness. The journal pulsed in her hands, a reminder of the hollow's nature. It fears life, it recoils from courage. Alina forced herself forward, step by step, heartbeat steady, mind clear. The tunnel opened into a chamber of statues. At first, they appeared lifeless, frozen mid-motion. But as Alina moved, she realized their faces contorted in silent screams. Each statue was a soul trapped by the hollow, a warning of the cost of failure. From the shadows, echoes of the lost spoke, warning her, mocking her, begging her to turn back. Fear rose, but Alina recalled the keeper's words. Few survive because they surrender to doubt. She navigated the room with precision, careful not to touch the statues or falter. Each successful step strengthened her resolve, demonstrating to the hollow that she would not be consumed without a fight. The labyrinth opened into a grotesque garden. Trees were skeletal, their blackened leaves whispering against each other, the wind carrying the faint echo of laughter, or was it screams? The ground was littered with bones, arranged in patterns that suggested ritual, sacrifice, or worse. From the shadows, creatures emerged, half-root, half-human, grotesque extensions of the hollow's will. They attacked silently, their motions fluid, unnatural. Alina fought, dodged, and ran, realizing each was not a true entity but a manifestation of the hollow's hunger. In the center of the garden lay a small altar, covered in inscriptions from the journal. It pulsed with light, a beacon of hope amid the nightmare. Alina approached cautiously, realizing this might be a key to surviving the hollow entirely. The garden's altar led Alina into a chamber larger than any she had seen. The floor was slick with a black, viscous substance that reflected the faint green light pulsating from the walls. At its center, a pool of shadow churned, alive with a hunger she could almost feel. Tendrils of darkness reached outward, probing like the fingers of some ancient predator. Each pulse of the pool echoed in her mind, carrying whispers of past intruders. Alina felt their despair as if it were her own, almost succumbing to the terror. A skeletal hand shot out from the water, clawing at her boot. She leapt back, heart hammering, and drove a jagged rock into the pool. The tendril recoiled with a screech that shook the chamber. She realized the pool was the hollow's heart, feeding on fear and life itself. The journal pulsed in her hands. Face it. Do not retreat. The hollow fears life. The keeper emerged from the shadows, towering and fluid, its form shifting like smoke. Few survive this far, it said. The hollow will claim you unless you bend. Eleanor's mind raced. She had survived trials of fear, endurance, and sanity. This was not a battle of strength, but of will. She steadied her breathing, focusing on the journal's words. Courage is your weapon, fear your enemy. The hollow reacted to her hesitation, tendrils lashing outward. Eleanor stepped forward into the pool's edge, asserting her will, her mind a beacon of life against the darkness. The keeper shrieked, a sound that twisted the walls and echoed through her skull. You cannot resist me. I already am resisting, Eleanor said, voice trembling but firm. I will not be yours. Shadows recoiled, the keeper faltering for the first time. Eleanor pressed deeper toward the hollow's core, refusing to give in. The pool parted, revealing a massive, pulsating mass of eyes, limbs, and shadow. It was the hollow, ancient and aware, its hunger tangible. Whispers became screams, each voice clawing at her mind. Eleanor grounded herself, focusing on her heartbeat, her presence, her identity. The hollow's attacks, tendrils, visions, whispers, were strongest where she doubted herself. She forced each thought back into control, asserting life over fear. The keeper lunged, attempting to overwhelm her, but Eleanor sidestepped, striking with mental focus. The hollow shrieked in pain, recoiling at the force of her will. For the first time, she realized the hollow could be resisted, not destroyed, but weakened by courage and clarity. The keeper presented a final test: offer a soul or perish. Eleanor's vision blurred with images of loved ones, death, and despair, the hollow's ultimate temptation. She almost faltered but remembered the journal. Fear feeds it, courage binds it. Summoning every ounce of will, Eleanor faced the hollow without submission. She projected her consciousness into the heart, asserting life, identity, and defiance. The hollow writhed, shrieking, its tendrils fracturing into nothingness. The keeper's form dissolved into smoke, leaving only silence. Eleanor collapsed, exhausted but victorious. She had survived the core of the hollow. When she awoke, sunlight spilled over the forest, warm and golden. The cabin appeared serene, almost welcoming, in contrast to the nightmare she had endured. The hollow's influence lingered faintly, but it no longer controlled her mind. The whispers had faded, leaving a profound silence that felt almost holy. Eleanor realized she had changed. Fear no longer dominated her thoughts, and her courage had been tempered in fire. She returned to the cabin, packed her journal, and prepared to leave. Before departing, she glanced back at the forest. The trees seemed still, yet she knew the hollow waited, patient, eternal, and hungry. Eleanor whispered a warning to no one. Beware the hollow, it waits, it always waits. She walked away, scarred, stronger, and forever changed by what she had survived. Eleanor could not rest. Even outside the cabin, the forest seemed alive, aware, its shadows stretching longer than they should. Every tree leaned subtly toward her path, leaves whispering secrets she could almost understand. The hollow had followed her, lingering at the edges of perception. Reluctantly, she returned to the labyrinth. The tunnels were more oppressive than ever, walls slick and pulsing with faint green light. The whispers were louder, forming fragmented sentences. You cannot escape they hunger. Her footsteps echoed, but the sound felt unnatural, delayed, as if the labyrinth itself were mocking her. She realized that the hollow had adapted, learning from her courage and her failures alike. Every step forward was a calculated test of her mind and will. The labyrinth twisted into impossible angles. Alina entered a corridor where reality seemed suspended. Shadows formed doorways that led nowhere. Floors spiraled upward and downward simultaneously, and walls bent around her. Each turn presented visions of her fears: isolation, failure, disfigurement, and death. One reflection showed her collapsing before the keeper, surrendering her soul. Another depicted her lost in the forest, screaming for help that never came. The hollow's strength grew with her doubt. Alina pressed forward, repeating the journal's mantra: courage binds, fear feeds. Her heartbeat became her anchor, the only rhythm that was hers, unshared with the labyrinth. Each victory over a hallucination fractured the hollow's hold, but the keeper remained, a shadowy observer, testing her endurance. In a vast chamber, Alina encountered the lost souls, figures frozen mid-motion, their faces twisted in silent screams. From the shadows they moved, reaching for her. Alina's first impulse was fear, but she remembered the journal, the hollow fear's life. She projected her presence, asserting her mind, refusing to falter. The figures recoiled, smoke rising from their forms. The keeper's voice echoed. Few survive this confrontation, few even try. Alina pressed onward, gaining strength with every step, her fear becoming fuel for her resilience. The labyrinth had become a crucible, shaping her will as much as it tormented her body. The labyrinth opened into a grotesque garden. Trees were skeletal, leaves like blackened bones. The ground was littered with skulls and femurs, arranged in ritualistic patterns. From the shadows, half-human, half-root creatures emerged. Their movements were fluid, unnatural, and deadly. Alina fought and dodged, realizing that these were extensions of the hollow's hunger, not truly sentient beings. At the center of the garden lay a pulsing altar, glowing faintly with the light of hope. Alina approached cautiously. The journal's words illuminated her mind. The hollow can be resisted, but not without understanding its core. Approach the heart. The altar hummed with power, inscriptions etched into the stone that seemed to move when unobserved. Memories of past intruders flashed in Alina's mind, their struggles, failures, despair. She understood. The hollow had grown over centuries, fed by fear, and the keeper had maintained its balance. The keeper reappeared. You cannot destroy it, only survive it. Alina clenched her fists. Survival required confronting the hollow at its heart, reclaiming her mind and refusing submission. She felt the altar's energy surge through her, granting clarity, courage, and focus. Alina entered the core chamber. The mass of shadows, eyes, and limbs pulsated like a living nightmare. The whispers became screams, attempting to fracture her mind. Grounding herself, Alina realized the hollow's attacks were strongest where she doubted herself. She forced every intrusive thought aside, asserting her identity and will. The keeper lunged with psychic force, but Alina sidestepped, striking mentally and fracturing the hollow's tendrils. Its massive form writhed, shrieking as her courage pushed it back. The keeper attacked again, projecting visions of death and despair. Alina dodged and resisted, asserting control over her own mind. You may not win, it hissed. I am here to survive, not to win, Alina said. You will not claim me. The hollow shrieked as tendrils fractured, eyes blinked out, and the keeper dissolved into smoke. Alina pressed forward into the heart, unflinching, refusing the fear that had claimed so many before her. The hollow attempted one last assault, projecting visions of loved ones, isolation, and death. Alina almost faltered, but she recited the journal's mantra: fear feeds it, courage binds it. She projected her will into the heart, asserting her presence fully. The hollow writhed, shrieking, its tendrils fracturing, retracting into nothingness. The keeper's form dissolved. Silence fell. Alina collapsed, exhausted but victorious. She had survived the core, proving life and courage could resist even the ancient darkness. Alina awoke outside, sunlight spilling over the forest. The cabin appeared serene, almost welcoming, in stark contrast to the labyrinth she had endured. The hollow's lingering presence was faint, a whisper at the edge of perception. She felt changed, scarred, yes, but stronger, her mind sharpened by ordeal. She knew the hollow was patient, eternal, hungry, but she had survived. Packing the journal, Alina prepared to leave. She glanced back at the forest, the trees still and quiet, but she knew better. The hollow waited always. She whispered a warning. Beware the hollow, it waits, it always waits. With courage tempered by ordeal, she walked away, scarred, stronger, and forever changed. The forest was silent, but the legacy of the hollow would endure, waiting for the next intruder. The rain had not stopped in 3 days. It fell in sheets across the city, turning the neon lights into long, bleeding streaks of color that shimmered on the slick asphalt. The alleys stank of garbage, gasoline, and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. Most people hurried home beneath umbrellas, never lifting their heads, never daring to look too closely at what lurked in the shadows. But he looked. From the rooftop of an abandoned building, he crouched in silence, watching the movement of the streets below. The man blended into the darkness so completely he seemed like part of the storm itself. His eyes never blinked, never strayed. Every passerby was measured. Every step, every nervous glance catalogued. He was not in a hurry. He had learned long ago that patience was the sharpest weapon. Down the block, a woman in her late 20s struggled with a broken umbrella. She cursed the wind, tugged her jacket tighter, and darted across the empty intersection. He followed her with his gaze, tilting his head slightly like a bird studying prey. His lips twitched at the corners, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. When she disappeared into a doorway, he exhaled through his nose, a soft hiss of disappointment. Not yet. She wasn't right. She didn't fit. Inside his pocket, his gloved fingers brushed against a single black feather. Smooth, perfect, a promise of what was to come. Detective Mara Lawson pulled her car to the curb 2 miles away. The call had come in just before midnight. Another body. She shoved the door open, boots splashing in the filthy water pooled in the gutter, and ducked under the tape strung between the lampposts. The rain plastered strands of her hair to her face as she approached the alley. The victim was a man this time, maybe 40, dressed in business clothes soaked through with rain. His body was twisted, unnaturally arranged, one hand stretched outward as though begging for something. Tucked neatly beneath his palm lay a feather. Mara's gut clenched, black, glossy, perfect. The Raven, one of the uniforms muttered, shifting uncomfortably. Mara crouched, eyes narrowing. The Raven had taken 3 lives already this month. This made 4. Always the same calling card, always the same precision. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses, just silence, just ritual. She studied the feather carefully. It wasn't random. None of this was. Whoever he wasn't killing out of rage. This was thought out, deliberate, calculated. Somewhere out there, she knew, he was watching. And he was smiling. The loft was cold, but he liked it that way. The chill sharpened his senses, kept him awake, precise. It was a wide, empty space in a forgotten corner of the city, a building condemned years ago, now nothing more than cracked bricks and broken windows. But inside, he had carved order out of ruin. The walls were lined with photographs, clippings, notes written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Strings of red twine connected one victim to the next, a web of cause and effect, intention and result. The Raven stood at the center of it all. On a steel table in front of him lay his tools, scalpels, hooks, a bone saw, surgical scissors. Each gleamed beneath the soft glow of a single hanging bulb. He cleaned them methodically, one by one, dipping them into disinfectant, wiping them with white cloth until not even the suggestion of a stain remained. Cleanliness was control. Control was everything. A small box rested at the end of the table. Inside, wrapped in black velvet, lay his feathers. Each victim deserved one. He didn't pluck them himself. No, he sourced them carefully, raven feathers only, uniform in length and sheen. Perfection mattered. Without it, the act would be meaningless. He sat in the lone chair, back straight, hands folded neatly in his lap. His heart slowed, his breathing evened. He closed his eyes. And he remembered. The businessman tonight had been disappointing, too quick, too ordinary. There had been no spark, no moment of revelation. Still, he had been necessary. Every life taken was a step closer to the masterpiece, the design that only he could see. Others called it madness. He called it art. His eyes flicked open. On the far wall in the center of the web was her face. Detective Mara Lawson. Newspaper clippings about her career. Photographs snapped from a distance. Notes about her family, her failed marriage, her promotion 2 years ago. He had been watching her longer than she could imagine. She wasn't prey, not yet. She was something different, a variable, a catalyst. Perhaps even the only one worthy of seeing his work completed. Mara sat in her office at the precinct, her jacket still damp from the rain. Files were spread across her desk, each marked with the Raven's signature. The faces of his victims stared back at her, young, old, male, female. There was no obvious connection, no motive she could pin down. But there was a pattern. Every body had been arranged, every scene had been ritualized, and always the feather. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. "Why the theatrics?" she muttered. Her partner, Detective Ray Torres, leaned in the doorway sipping stale coffee. "Because he wants you to see it, wants us to chase him. Guys like this, they don't just kill, they perform." Mara frowned. "Performance leaves mistakes, slips. I just need to find one." Outside, thunder rumbled, rolling low over the city. And somewhere in the storm, the Raven smiled. The storm had eased, but the city was still dripping, its streets slick and shining beneath the sickly orange glow of the lamps. The Raven preferred nights like this. Fewer people, fewer distractions. The city was quieter, more obedient. He stood beneath the awning of a closed pawn shop, watching. Across the street, the bookstore's lights flickered. A young woman inside stacked novels onto a cart, humming softly to herself as she worked. She moved with the tired rhythm of someone who had stayed too late, unaware of the weight of the shadows pressing against the glass. The Raven tilted his head. He'd been watching her for weeks, memorizing her patterns. She left the shop every night at 10, always alone. She never took the main streets, preferring the side alleys that cut between the blocks, shortcuts that left her exposed. Predictability was weakness, and weakness was an invitation. He slid his hand into his pocket and touched the feather waiting there. Smooth, perfect, tonight would be hers. Mara Lawson shuffled papers across her desk, frustration tightening her jaw. 4 victims, 4 different backgrounds, no overlap in their lives. A businessman, a college student, a mother of 2, a transient. No obvious connection. But something gnawed at her. She stood, packing. Torres leaned against her desk, watching. "You've got that look again," he said. "There's a rhythm here," Mara muttered. "Look at the spacing, 4 victims in 4 weeks, always on a Wednesday, always late at night." Torres frowned. "You think he's working on a schedule?" "He's not just killing, he's planning. Each week is part of a design." She stopped packing, staring at the evidence board. "It's not random, it's choreography." Torres sipped his coffee. "So we wait for Wednesday." Mara nodded, though unease prickled her skin. Waiting meant another body, and if she was right, the next performance was already being staged. The Raven followed at a distance as the young woman locked up the bookstore. She pulled her jacket close and hurried down the side street, boots splashing in shallow puddles. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, distracted by the glow of the screen. "Perfect." He moved silently, his footsteps drowned by the hum of the city. Every angle, every corner of the alley was mapped in his mind. He knew where she would pass, where the shadows were deepest, where the sound of her voice wouldn't carry. He inhaled slowly, savoring the moment before the strike. The hunt was always the purest part. His hand brushed the knife beneath his coat. The feather waited. The alley was narrow, littered with trash bags and the sour stink of rotting food. The bookstore clerk's boots splashed through puddles as she hurried, her phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking softly, almost laughing, her voice a thin thread in the cavern of silence around her. The raven followed soundlessly, his shadow swallowed by the walls. He let her get ahead, just far enough for the illusion of safety. She turned right at the end of the alley as she always did, her shortcut through the vacant lot. He drew the knife. The blade glimmered beneath the weak glow of the street lamp, rain droplets catching on its edge. He steadied his breathing, every motion rehearsed 100 times in his mind. Tonight would be clean, efficient, perfect. The woman paused to adjust her bag, her back to him. She never heard him close the distance. One hand clamped her mouth, the other pressed the blade against her side. She stiffened, a muffled cry caught in her throat. The raven leaned close, his voice barely more than a breath. "SHH, don't fight, it will be over soon." Her phone clattered to the ground, the call still connected, her friend's voice tinny in the puddle where the screen glowed. The raven ignored it. He pulled her deeper into the shadows, away from the streetlight where the city would not see. The ritual began. At the precinct, Mara's phone buzzed. She frowned, pulling it from her pocket. A number she didn't recognize, already flagged by dispatch. An open line, background noise, rain, footsteps, and something else. A stifled cry. Her pulse spiked. "Trace it," she barked, tossing the phone to Tors. He scrambled to set up the trace while Mara grabbed her coat. "We've got him. He's moving now." "Lawson," Tors started, but she was already out the door, sprinting to her car. The raven arranged the body carefully, every angle deliberate, every limb placed with precision. The woman's eyes were wide, glassy, fixed on nothing. Beneath her hand, he tucked the feather, smoothing it gently into place. He stepped back, admiring his work. It was almost beautiful, the chaos of death transformed into order. But something gnawed at him, a wrongness in the air. He turned, scanning the shadows. For a moment, he thought he heard footsteps. Then silence, only the rain. He slipped into the night, vanishing as though he had never been there. Mara's car screeched to a halt on the edge of the vacant lot. Her flashlight cut through the dark, the beam jittering with the tremor in her hand. Then she saw her. The woman lay in the mud, arms arranged, hand clutching the black feather. Mara's stomach twisted. She forced herself forward, kneeling beside the body. She was too late, again. But this time she felt it. He had been here moments ago. The air still carried the weight of him, a presence that lingered like smoke after fire. She closed her eyes, rain running down her face. "You're not untouchable," she whispered, "and I will find you." The raven stood at the window of his loft, staring out over the dripping rooftops. The city was restless tonight, sirens echoing faintly in the distance, flashes of red and blue reflecting on wet concrete. He should have felt satisfaction. The ritual had been executed cleanly, the arrangement perfect. Yet unease clung to him like the damp air. She had been there. Detective Mara Lawson. He had felt her presence as sure as the rain on his face. She was closing the gap, arriving too soon, closer than she ever had before. It was thrilling. He turned back to the wall. Her photograph stared at him from the center of the web. He stepped closer, his fingers brushing the corner of the picture. In her eyes, he saw something he didn't find in his victims. Not fear, not fragility, but defiance. Perhaps that was what drew him. He spoke softly to the picture, his voice calm, deliberate. "You're beginning to see, aren't you? The pattern, the rhythm, it's meant for you." On the steel table, he laid out a new feather, smoothing its barbs with care. Not for another victim. Not yet. This one was for her. At the precinct, Mara leaned against the sink in the restroom, staring into the mirror. Her reflection looked pale, exhausted. The case was consuming her, eating into her sleep, into her sanity. But she couldn't stop. She replayed the phone call in her head over and over. The faint cry, the muffled voice, the sound of footsteps, the rain. She had been so close. "Another body," she whispered, "and all I got was his shadow." Tors appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "You need rest, Lawson. You're running yourself into the ground." "I can't rest. He's escalating. 4 weeks, 4 bodies. He won't stop until—" She cut herself off, her jaw tightening. "Until what?" Tors asked carefully. Mara looked at the floor. "Until he gets what he wants." Back in the loft, the Raven opened a leather-bound journal. His handwriting was precise, immaculate. He recorded every detail of the kill, the location, the timing, the resistance, the arrangement. Each entry was part of a larger story, one that only he could read in full. But tonight's notes ended differently. Interference. She arrived too soon. Timing must be adjusted. She is learning the steps to the dance. He closed the journal, placed it carefully beside the feather, and allowed himself a rare smile. For the first time in years, he felt something more than control. He felt anticipation. The crime scene tape fluttered in the morning wind, its edges damp from the storm that had soaked the city overnight. Mara crouched near the vacant lot where the bookstore clerk had been found, her gloves slick with mud. The forensics team had already packed up, but she wanted to see the site again, without the noise, without the distractions. She traced her flashlight across the ground, though daylight already bled through the gray clouds. The arrangement of the body replayed in her mind. The angle of the arms, the placement of the feather, the unnatural serenity of it all. Something still felt unfinished. She pushed deeper into the lot, eyes scanning every scrap of trash, every puddle. That was when she saw it, half buried in the mud, a scrap of paper no larger than her palm. She pulled it free carefully, unfolding it with steady fingers. Her heart skipped. It was a page torn from a book, the words smeared with water but still legible. A single line stood out, underlined in precise, heavy strokes. "The dance between predator and prey is the only true art." Her stomach tightened. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. He had left it for her. From the loft, the Raven replayed the memory in his mind. The page had been chosen carefully, folded neatly, and placed just out of plain sight. Not too hidden, not too obvious. He wanted her to find it. He imagined her face as she read it, the way her eyes would narrow, the way she would understand. Not the full picture, not yet, but enough to feel the edges of the design. It was a test. Would she recognize the invitation? Would she step into the rhythm willingly? He smoothed a feather between his fingers. "You will," he murmured. "You have no choice. This city belongs to us now. The others, they're just notes in the symphony." At the precinct, Mara dropped the wet scrap onto her desk. Tors leaned over her shoulder, frowning. "A book page. He's playing games with you now." "No," Mara said firmly. "He's not playing, he's directing." Tors gave her a skeptical look. "So what's the message?" Mara stared at the words, predator and prey. She shook her head. "It's not just about the victims. He's talking about me." Tors cursed softly. "Lawson, don't let him in your head." But he was already there. She could feel it, the weight of his gaze even now. He wasn't just killing at random anymore. He was performing for her. And somewhere in the city, she knew he was watching, waiting for her next move. The rain had finally broken, leaving the city slick and gleaming under a low, pale sky. Mara tugged her coat tighter as she walked the narrow street, her eyes darting between the storefronts. She had been chasing leads all day, her energy frayed, but the scrap of paper burned in her pocket like a brand. The line had come from a rare book, a 19th century philosophical text on predation and art. She confirmed it with the library archives that morning. There were only 3 known copies in the city. One was missing. That was the trail, and she was on it. Across the street, in the shadow of a boarded-up cafe, the raven watched. He blended into the gray of the alley, his coat draped long, his hat low. His posture was calm, almost casual, but every movement of hers drew his full attention. She had taken the bait. He had known she would. For the first time, he wasn't just leaving evidence for her to find. He was following her, close enough to feel her rhythm, close enough to study her in the wild. Mara paused at a corner shop, consulting a crumpled note. The raven's eyes lingered on the way her hand clenched the page, the tension in her jaw. She was strong, yes, but she carried weariness in her shoulders. She was human, fragile, breakable. He whispered under his breath, savoring the word, "Pray." But his chest tightened unexpectedly, not with hunger, not with bloodlust, with anticipation. Inside the shop, Mara spoke to the owner, an elderly man with round glasses and trembling hands. He confirmed what she suspected. Weeks earlier, a quiet, polite man had purchased the rare book in cash. No name given, no questions asked. Mara's pulse quickened. "Do you remember what he looked like?" The man hesitated, searching his memory. Tall, dark coat, his eyes cold, like he was studying me. The words sent a chill up her spine. He had been here, close, too close. When she stepped back outside, the street felt different, narrower, quieter. She glanced left, then right, scanning faces. A man at a bus stop, a woman walking her dog, a teenager smoking behind a lamppost. But no one stood out. And yet the back of her neck prickled. From the shadows, the raven observed the shift in her posture, the stiffening, the cautious turns of her head. She felt him. She didn't know it was him, not yet, but instinct was awakening in her. It was exhilarating. He took a step forward, then another, close enough that a gust of wind could have carried his scent to her. For a moment, he almost let her see him. Almost. But anticipation was sweeter than contact. He melted back into the alley, leaving nothing but the echo of his presence. That night, Mara sat at her desk, the rare book citation open on her computer. She typed her notes with shaky hands, unable to shake the feeling of eyes on her, as if the city itself had been watching. Torres stopped at her desk, frowning. "You look spooked." "I'm not spooked," she snapped, too quickly. She closed the file, leaned back in her chair, and muttered under her breath. "He was there today, I know it." The precinct was nearly silent at midnight, save for the hum of old fluorescent lights. Most of the detectives had gone home, but Mara sat alone at her desk, nursing her third cup of bitter coffee. Her eyes burned as she scrolled through her notes, crime scene photos, coroner's reports, the book citation. The raven was close. She could feel it like a low voltage under her skin. She rubbed her temples, trying to fight the exhaustion. That was when she noticed the envelope. It sat neatly atop the stack of case files, pale and thin, where she was certain nothing had been just minutes before. No name, no stamp, no sign of delivery. Her chest tightened. Slowly she reached for it, her fingers brushing the paper as if it might vanish. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single feather, pristine and black, tied with a thread of red silk, and a note. The handwriting was sharp, elegant. "You are not the hunter, Mara. You are the performance." Her breath caught. She scanned the room, every shadow, every corner, but the precinct was empty, which meant he had been here, inside. Across the street, the raven watched from the darkness of a parked car, the faint glow of her office window painting her silhouette. He could see her reaction, the stiffening shoulders, the sudden sweep of her gaze. Perfect. Leaving the feather on her desk had been a risk, but risk was the spice of creation. The dance could not be choreographed from a distance forever. She needed to feel his breath at the back of her neck. She needed to understand that the stage belonged to him, and she was now part of it. He whispered into the stillness of the car. "Now you know, Mara. I can touch your world whenever I choose." Mara burst from the precinct doors, her eyes sweeping the street, hand instinctively hovering near her holster. The night smelled of rain and gasoline, but the street was quiet, too quiet. A single car passed in the distance, its tires hissing on wet pavement. But whoever had delivered that note was gone. Her pulse pounded as she shoved the envelope into her coat pocket. She didn't call Tors, didn't file an incident report. This wasn't something she wanted buried in procedure. This was personal. He was circling her now, and she refused to be caught off guard again. The Raven drove away without headlights, slipping into the veins of the city. His smile was faint, controlled, but his hands trembled against the steering wheel. Not from fear, from exhilaration. The prey had seen the shadow of the predator. The dance had begun in earnest. And he knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, that Mara Lawson was the finest prey he had ever chosen. The next morning, Mara entered the precinct early, her hair damp from a hurried shower, her eyes bloodshot from a night without sleep. The envelope from the Raven sat on her desk like a black hole, but instead of fear, it fueled her resolve. He had crossed a line, now so would she. Tors strolled in minutes later, balancing a coffee in each hand. "You look like hell, Lawson." "Thanks," she muttered, snatching the cup he offered. He frowned at the stack of files spread across her desk. "You didn't go home, did you?" "No time," Mara said. She leaned in, her voice low. "He's watching me. I can feel it. If he's close enough to put a feather on my desk, he's close enough to slip again." Tors raised a brow. "And what do you propose we do? Put a uniform on your doorstep?" "No," Mara said, shaking her head. "That'll spook him. He wants me alone. He thrives on shadows, on control." She paused, a grim smile tugging at her lips. "So let's give him what he wants. Let's make me bait." That night, Mara parked her unmarked car 3 blocks from her apartment and walked the rest of the way on foot, her boots crunching on broken pavement. The city was alive with its usual background noise, distant sirens, the hum of traffic, the laughter of late-night drunks. But she listened for something different, the sound of a second pair of footsteps. Inside her apartment, she didn't switch on the main light. Just a small lamp by the window, enough to cast her silhouette against the blinds. She moved slowly, deliberately, pretending to settle in for the night. She poured herself a glass of water, set it on the table, and dropped her coat on the chair. All the while, her heart pounded against the wire microphone taped beneath her blouse. Downstairs, Tors and 2 surveillance techs sat in a van, eyes glued to the monitors. One whispered, "She looks exposed." Tors gritted his teeth. "That's the point." Across the street, the Raven stood in the shadows of an alley, his body perfectly still. From this vantage, he could see her moving through the apartment. She looked tired, vulnerable, but there was something about her movements that didn't sit right. Too measured, too rehearsed. His eyes narrowed. Was this a performance? The thought made him smile faintly. Even now, she was trying to step onto his stage, trying to write herself into his art, admirable but clumsy. He knew the rhythm of deception too well. He could feel the wrongness in the cadence of her movements, the faint tug of artificiality. He whispered to himself, "A trap." Inside the apartment, Mara sat by the window, pretending to read a file. Her ears strained for the faintest noise, a creak of wood, a shift of gravel, the brush of fabric in the night. But nothing came. 10 minutes, 20, 40. Finally, Tor's voice crackled through the earpiece. "He's not biting. Pull back, Lawson." Her stomach twisted in frustration. She'd been so sure. She pulled the mic tape free, tossed it onto the table, and let her head fall into her hands. From the shadows, the Raven turned away, his coat whispering in the night breeze. He would not stumble into her little net. But her effort thrilled him. She was learning, adapting, trying to hunt. That made her more dangerous, yes, but also more exquisite. He would reward her courage, soon. But on his terms. The morning sun was pale and cold when Mara stepped out of her apartment building. She hadn't slept again. Her failed trap played on repeat in her mind. She had set the bait, but he hadn't taken it. Or worse, he had been there watching, knowing, laughing silently in the shadows. She slid into her car, tossed her bag on the passenger seat, and turned the key. The engine hummed to life, but something was wrong. Her stomach dropped. On the dashboard, tied delicately to the steering wheel, was a single black feather. Beneath it, taped neatly, was a Polaroid photograph. Her own apartment, taken from the alley across the street, through the window. She stared at it, frozen, bile rising in her throat. The timestamp on the photo read 01:47. She had been inside, pretending to read, while he had been outside, documenting her performance. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the photo free. Scrawled across the white border in sharp, slanted ink were 5 words. Hunter, or my reflection. From the loft, the Raven replayed the moment in his mind. The soft click of the Polaroid camera, the satisfying weight of the feather on her steering wheel. He had chosen not to enter her apartment, though he could have. He had chosen not to harm her, though the temptation had burned in him. No, his art demanded patience. This was not about breaking her body. It was about breaking her certainty. He wrote in his journal, "She sets the stage, but the script is mine. She believes herself the predator. Good, let her. The fall will be more exquisite." At the precinct, Mara slammed the photo onto Tor's desk. He was there, watching me. He knew it was a trap. Tor's eyes widened at the picture, his jaw tightening. "Christ, Lawson, this is escalation. He's not just taunting you, he's documenting you." Mara leaned in, her voice low, dangerous. "Then good. That means he's getting cocky, and cocky men make mistakes." But when she walked back to her desk, she caught herself glancing toward the window. For the first time, she pulled the blinds shut. That night, long after the precinct had emptied, Mara sat alone with the Polaroid in her hand. The question written there burrowed into her skull. Hunter, or my reflection? The more she turned it over, the more annoying dread crept in. Because somewhere, in the deepest recess of her mind, she feared the answer might not be so simple. The city had gone quiet, almost unnaturally so. Mara's boots echoed in the alleyways as she followed the trail she'd pieced together. The book purchase, the abandoned storefront, the footprints the rain hadn't washed away. Every nerve in her body screamed that he was close, that he had known she would come. She ignored the voice of reason, ignored Tor's warnings. This was no longer about procedure or backup. This was personal. The Raven moved through the shadows, almost daring her to see him. He didn't have to. She could feel him. Every instinct, every sense sharpened as she approached the edge of a derelict warehouse, the flickering light inside revealing nothing but piles of rusted metal. Her gun was drawn, hand steady, breath controlled, but Mara's mind raced. He had been anticipating her every move, and now she was stepping straight into the heart of his design. The dim glow of a single hanging bulb illuminated the meticulously arranged interior. Mirrors lining the walls, each reflecting a different corner, a different perspective. It was a room meant to disorient, to trap, to perform. "Detective Mara Lawson," he said softly, stepping from the shadows. His voice echoed, smooth, precise. "You came alone, brave, foolish, admirable." Mara's grip on the gun tightened. "I'm not afraid of you." He tilted his head. "Oh, you will be, but not yet, not until the curtain falls." Every step Mara took echoed in the mirrors. Every reflection seemed to shift slightly, warping her perception. She realized with a sudden chill that he had been watching the way she moved before, inside, outside, every angle recorded and anticipated. He circled her, slow, deliberate. "You think you can outmaneuver me, but the dance has already begun, and tonight it ends." Mara steadied herself, scanning the room. She had one advantage, unpredictability. He could calculate her patterns, but he could not anticipate chaos. With a deep breath, she moved. The mirrors reflected movement, hiding shadows. The raven froze, sensing, but too late. Mara lunged behind a stack of crates, the reflection confusing him. Her gun found its mark, not to shoot, but to distract, to create leverage. The dance was on. By the time the night ended, both were breathless. Mara had cornered him, forced a retreat, but he had vanished into the labyrinth of the city. Not captured, not defeated, but changed. For the first time, he had underestimated her. Mara stumbled out into the street, clutching the Polaroid he had left her weeks ago. She looked up at the rain-dark sky and whispered, "You're not untouchable." Somewhere he smiled, watching. The city was drenched in fog, the streets nearly empty except for the distant hum of a lone taxi. Mara walked slowly, exhausted, clutching the evidence she had gathered, the notes, the feathers, the Polaroid. Every step felt heavy, weighed down by the memory of the warehouse. The raven had vanished, leaving only shadows and whispers, but she knew better. He was out there, always watching, always planning. She stopped at the edge of a park, the same park where the first victim had been found. Her flashlight cut through the mist, illuminating a path slick with rain. The air was thick with the metallic tang she had learned to recognize, the signature of his presence. A movement flickered in the corner of her eye. He stepped from the fog, calm, poised, a single black feather held between his fingers. He smiled, not a predator's grin this time, but a faint acknowledgement of respect. "You survived," he said softly. "You adapted, you danced beautifully." Myra's finger hovered over the trigger of her gun. "It's over. You're done." He shook his head. "No, you misunderstand. It's never over. Not for me, not for you. We're bound, you and I, in this performance." She took a cautious step forward, the flashlight glinting off the feather. "Then I'll end it tonight, or you will." The raven laughed, a soft, chilling sound. "Perhaps, but art, true art, does not end, it evolves." With that, he dropped the feather at her feet. One fluid motion, gone into the mist before she could react. Mara picked up the feather, turning it over in her hand. It was flawless, perfect, and terrifying. Somewhere in the city, the raven disappeared into the night, leaving her with a single, undeniable truth. The hunt had ended for now, but the game, the dance, would continue. She exhaled slowly, stepping back into the fog, her reflection stretching long and distorted across the wet pavement. In that moment, she understood. She was no longer just a detective. She was part of the story, part of the rhythm he had created. And though she had survived, she knew she would always feel the shadow of him behind her, a whisper in the wind, a promise of what might come. The city slept, unaware of the predator who watched, waited, and perfected his art. Mara walked on, the black feather pressed tight in her hand. Somewhere far off, he smiled. The curtain had fallen, but the performance would never truly end.